Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. First of all, if you're new here, I post new book reviews almost every single day, so if you're looking for some reading inspiration, then maybe feel free to stick around. Now, today's video is not actually going to be a book review, but rather a mid-year review. I want to talk about what I've been reading, what my reading cycle or my reading trends seem to be like, how I feel about reading this year, and then share some of my favorites from what I've read so far in 2023. So I am filming this in June 2023. We're halfway through 2023, which is crazy to say, and let's talk about what I've been reading. And of course, if you want to share what you've been reading and things that you've been enjoying in the first half of the year, I love to hear that as well. So I am filming this on June 20th. It's probably going to go up a few days after I film it because I do have some other book reviews I want to get out beforehand. And as of late afternoon on June 20th, I have read 157 books this year. So that is the number that we are working with, and the whole collection of those books is what I drew from to make the points that I'm going to talk about in this video. Now, the first thing people say when they hear that I have read 157 books this year is they think that I either do some sort of speed reading technique or I spend all my time reading. I just want to make a point. First of all, I love reading. It's one of my favorite hobbies, so I don't feel like it's a chore for me to do, but I actually don't spend a large portion of my day reading. I have a day job that I go to. I have people I like to spend time with and other hobbies that I like to devote time to, as well as I enjoy traveling. So I actually don't spend a large portion of my day reading. What I do is I read consistently. And I feel like if we reference back to that old fable of the tortoise and the hare, slow and steady wins the race, although reading is not a race. But I feel like if I just read consistently right before I go to bed, usually that's the time I read every single day, then I can get through a very large number of books. So 157 books as of today, or as of this afternoon. I do plan to read a little bit tonight. And so far I can say this year has been a really, really good year. I have been loving reading this year. I feel like I have read a lot of standout series starting early in the year. I've just had a lot of good recommendations, even from viewers who watch this channel or who have watched videos from mine. So I really appreciate those recommendations because some of them have turned out to be favorites of mine. And I just think it has been a great year for reading for me personally. I find that this year I'm tending to focus, at least the first half of this year, I focused a lot on manga series that I had been reading or had started in 2021 and wanted to continue in 2022, or that I picked up in 2022. I feel like when I read, I definitely go through cycles or trends. So I feel in this year, or the first half of this year, my nonfiction numbers have been down. I've read fewer nonfiction volumes, but I feel like in previous years I maybe gravitated a little bit more towards nonfiction. So we have that going on where I feel like I'm shifting towards fiction, particularly manga, at least for the first half of this year. But I do know myself, and I know the way I read, I do go through trends. So I know that eventually I'm probably going to swing to something else. And I have noticed that when I do read nonfiction, I feel like my focus this year has been a lot on arts. So like photography collections or illustration collections. These are the things that have been interesting to me in the first half of this year. This can change in the next 6 months. This probably isn't going to stay static, but that's just how I found what I've been finding that I've enjoyed in the first half of this year. Also, a quick note, I said I read 157 books this year so far. I obviously have not reviewed 157 books. I don't review every single book that I read for a variety of reasons. So that explains why I don't have maybe 157 book reviews from 2023. So now, with those numbers, with that information in mind, let's talk about some of this year's favorites. So far, there's still plenty of time for lots of stuff to get on my final year list, but I wanted to talk about some of the things that I have read this year and what I have been loving. I'm going to do this in two sections. First, I'm going to talk about fiction. I think almost everything on my fiction list is manga. And because I have been a little bit more focused on fiction, particularly manga, this half of the year, a lot of my selections are from there. But I do have some nonfictions that I wanted to talk about. Obviously, I can't feature every single book that I have read, all 157 books, but I just wanted to touch on some that have made an impression on me in the first half of 2023. And if you're looking for some reading recommendations, but you don't want to go through all my videos to find out what I like, what I don't like, this could be a starting point if anything I'm talking about sounds interesting. You know that at least it made my top list based on 150 plus books from this year, so it might be a favorite for you. However, I'm not going to be offended if you don't like what I selected. We're all different, and that's what makes reading wonderful. So, what I've been reading this year, loosely in the order that I read them, but not really. I tried my best. The first one was a series that I read early in the year series. There were only 2 in the series, and that was Check Please, volumes 1 and 2 by Ngozi Ukazu. I'll have her name obviously in the description below. So this was a series that my aunt and my sister had been trying to get me to read for a while, but I kept putting off because the way I perceived it, it was some sort of YA comic involving a hockey team. And hockey's fine. I definitely have no objection to going to like the minor league hockey games, and I've actually never seen an NHL game, but I'm sure that those are super fun too. I like watching it at the Olympics, but I'm not really into hockey. I'm not deeply invested in hockey, so reading some sort of comic about hockey, some guy playing hockey in college, seemed incredibly boring to me. So I put it off for a while, and it wound up being a massive hit. I do not like purchasing books to own. I know that's counterintuitive because I'm sitting behind a bookshelf, but I am at a stage in my life where I move a lot, and I hate moving all of my books, and I have books in a bin and I have books elsewhere in the house. I don't like moving them. So I told myself, until I get a house, we need to stop purchasing books. But I made an exception for Check Please, and I purchased volumes 1 and 2. I think if you're looking for an easy comic that has a little bit of romance, actually a lot of romance, and then a lot of focus on friendship and just learning how to discover yourself, Check Please was an amazing, amazing series that I highly recommended. The year started out strong. This was an easy win for me at the very beginning of the year, and it was something that I've been sleeping on for a while that I needed to not have been sleeping on. So if you still haven't read that series, I would recommend checking it out. Next up in the fiction category was the continuation of me reading Haikyuu. So I started reading Haikyuu by Haruichi Furudate, which is a manga series, last summer, I think. But for most of these volumes, I have to order them from other libraries, so they take a while to get in. So I had not finished that series last year. I still haven't finished it this year, but I continued reading it into this year, and I'm just loving the team dynamics. Haikyuu is a sports manga. It's the first real sports manga that I've read, and I love it, although it does make me incredibly stressed. It is a volleyball sports manga, and we are following a team, Karasuno High School, as they attempt to get to the Tokyo tournament and prove it big. Prove it big, make it big. We also have our main character, Hinata, who is a rather short individual for the sport of volleyball, who's trying to prove to everyone that he too can be a volleyball player despite his shorter stature. I love this series. I'm loving the continuation of it. I think if it's a manga series that you haven't read and you're interested in trying a sports manga, this might be one to gravitate towards. I feel like it's well known. I don't want to say like highly reviewed because I don't know how the official reviewers reviewed it, but I've heard a lot of good things about it. It was one that was recommended to me like 6 years ago that I just didn't read until now, and I have been loving it. Next up is something that was adapted from a web comic, and that is Solo Leveling. I have now read volumes 1 through 6 of Solo Leveling, and I love this series. It was adapted from a web comic, but I like the world building. I feel like the author could have kept it very simple and just focused on this guy who is the protagonist killing monsters, but he's made it a little deeper, and I've just been enjoying reading the series as it develops. In Solo Leveling, we follow a protagonist who lives in a futuristic world. The story is set in Korea, where portals open and monsters can come out, and special people are able to fight these monsters, and there is our protagonist who is fighting the monsters even though it's a dangerous profession and he's not really good at it, to take care of his sick mother and his younger sister. So that's kind of the story of Solo Leveling. It obviously has evolved away from the core plot, but I've really, really enjoyed it, and I think if you're looking for a nice, easy comic, and Check Please didn't sound interesting to you, then maybe Solo Leveling would be something that would be interesting to you. Next, another manga series. There's a lot of manga on this. This one is Komi Can't Communicate by, and I'm totally blanking. Is it Tomohito Oda? Am I saying that correctly? Anyways, Komi Can't Communicate. I'll have the author's name down below. Komi Can't Communicate was a book that I'd actually read the first 2 volumes of back in 2021, a long time ago, but for whatever reason, well, actually I know what happened. I got sidetracked by another manga series I was reading in 2021, and I never returned to Komi Can't Communicate. However, my sisters convinced me that I needed to give this series a try, so I picked it back up, and I am loving it. Komi Can't Communicate follows a girl who initially her class thinks that she's kind of like a queen and that she thinks she's better than everyone else, and that she is just so good that everyone else should be honored to be in her presence because she doesn't talk. But actually she doesn't talk because she has a lot of anxiety. She has this communication disorder, hence the name, Komi can't communicate. And there's one boy in the class in particular, Tadano, who picks up on this, and he is working with Komi on this goal of having Komi make 100 friends during her high school career. Of course, feelings start getting involved, and the series has grown from that initial plot, but I've been loving the series. I'm through volume 24, I think, right now, and I really enjoy where the story has gone. I think we're waiting on the next couple volumes to come out in English. I think that's where we stand, but I'm excited to continue this series. And if you're looking for something that's a little bit more sweet, maybe Haikyuu isn't really doing it for you because you don't like sports manga, or you're not sure that's something interesting for you, you want something a little bit more sweet, Komi Can't Communicate, I feel like would be the perfect mix for you. Next up, this one, it is hard to say what my favorite manga series are of this year, and I probably wouldn't pick, but if I had to pick, if you really, really threatened me or a loved one and had me come up with something, it might be this one, and that is Kaguya-sama Love is War. This was a viewer recommendation saying, hey, you need to read this. And the premise is we have two individuals, Shirogane and Shinomiya, who are the student council president and vice president at an elite high school. They both have feelings for each other, but neither one wants to be the one to confess first, so they're in this war of sorts to get the other person to confess first. It's a battle of the wits, and it is incredibly funny, but the romance also sneaks up on you. I have been devouring this series. I actually have like 5 more volumes that I need to read this week up on my little bookshelf. So this is my personal bookshelf, as well as the other books that are crammed all over this apartment, and then I have all my library books in a different location, so that's just how it's set up. But the library books are over there, and I have like 5 more volumes in Kaguya-sama Love is War. If you are looking to be laughing hard every single volume, well, most volumes, we're getting into a little bit more of the romance where I am now, but if you're looking to laugh out loud, then Kaguya-sama Love is War by Aka Akasaka is definitely the one that I think you should try if you haven't tried it yet. I will say, I experienced a little apprehension when I read the plot, like the little description, where I was like, it seems interesting, but I don't know. So it does seem interesting, but I was worried that it wasn't going to have enough content to last 15, 20, 25 volumes. I'm not sure how long the series is, but I promise you there is enough content to last that long. So it's very interesting, catches your attention, and it has enough humorous moments and character development and plot to continue the story. So that one probably squeaks ahead of the other ones. Haikyuu, Komi Can't Communicate, but they're all really good, and I really recommend all of them. Next up, we'll do another manga, my last manga on the series, on the fiction side, and that is, no matter how I look at it, It's You Guys' Fault I'm Not Popular by Nico Tanagawa. Now that is a mouthful. So no matter how I look at it, that's how I'm just gonna say it briefly, is a series that I actually read through volume like 15 or something back in 2021. Then I moved, then I switched library districts, then I kind of lost my role on all the series I was reading. So this one kind of got forgotten. I do want to continue the series, so I decided to reread from the beginning so I could actually like catch up on the plot of everything. And I really enjoy this one. This series, I do have to warn you, if you're looking to start, the first like 5, 6 volumes can be pretty dark. The main character in the series is Tomoko, who's a girl who's dealing with social isolation and a lot of loneliness, and it can be very hard and depressing to read. You're reading about a high school girl who is really isolated, who is really lonely, who wants to have friends but can't make any, and it's not like you read that in volume 1 and things get better in volume 2. Growth in the series is really incremental, which I really like. I like that slow burn approach to growth, and I like the way that the character development is very incremental, but I think other people, especially if you don't realize that things do get better, and I promise if you read this series, things do get better. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, but I do see why people wouldn't like this series, or why people picking it up might be concerned that this is going to be a very dark and depressing read from beginning to end. I've been loving it. It technically is a reread, but I really enjoy it, so I've been reading it, and I'm going to include it on this list because eventually I will get to new volumes that I haven't read, but for now we're still in the reread, but I have been loving it. The final fiction book that I wanted to talk about is actually a cozy mystery by an author that I really, really enjoyed and wanted to give props to. This one was an audiobook that I listened to called 2 Part Sugar, 1 Part Murder by Valerie Burns. This one makes my list because I do enjoy cozy mysteries. This was something I discovered during 2020 when there was fun things going on in the world. And I was stuck in a library district that I felt made interesting book purchasing decisions. Basically, I was forced out of my comfort zone of reading sci-fi and fantasy, which was a lot of what I had read up to that point, sprinkled in with maybe a little bit of manga or comics, not a whole lot. But I really focused on sci-fi and fantasy, and my new library that I was in and stuck in for the foreseeable future didn't have a lot of sci-fi or fantasy. So I turned to Cozy Mysteries, and I discovered that I kind of liked them. They're fun, they're light, they're easy. I scare very easily. I cannot do true crime, and any sort of gory or too scary or too graphic mystery, well, I'm inherently like intellectually interested in it because I want to know who did it. It's too scary for me to read and then actually get a full night of sleep without being scared every 5 seconds afterwards. So mysteries I had kind of written off, even though intellectually I kind of liked the puzzle of it. And then I discovered Cozy Mysteries, which inherently aren't very graphic in their violence and tend to be a little softer and are just an enjoyable, light, fluffy read usually. So I read a lot of those in like 2020, 2021. But normally I find that Cozy Mysteries on my ranking scale are like a 3-star. They're usually enjoyable, quick read it at the beach, you listen to an audiobook on a long car ride. You read it as like a palate cleanser after reading some book that was really emotionally hard-hitting, but they're not like, they rarely get ranked more than 3-star. Most of the time I know how they're gonna flow. It's comforting. It's like, I don't want to say like junk food. It's like a comfort read. I know exactly what to expect. It's like when you're watching a rom-com. You kind of know the beats of the rom-com. So even though like the details may be rearranged, you know what you're getting into when you put that on. You know what you're getting into when you get a Cozy Mystery. And therefore they're very comforting to read, but they can also be very predictable to read. And while I don't think 2-Part Sugar, 1-Part Murder was super original, as in like it didn't break any great molds, I just found the characters really compelling. I liked the storyline, I liked the individuals, I just liked everything about this, and I would give this volume or this entry in the Cozy Mystery series, and this is entry 1 in the series, a 4-star, which is quite a high rating for a Cozy Mystery. I also, I read one other book by Valerie Burns thus far this year. I think it was called Book Clubbed to Death, which was also really, really good. So I just find that I really enjoy this Cozy Mystery author, and I think if you like Cozy Mysteries and you haven't checked out her works, I would recommend giving them a read because I have been loving them and enjoying them. Now, okay, that was all of our fiction recommendations. That was the top fiction that rose to the top over my 157 books. However, I did mention that I have been reading less nonfiction this year just due to my natural ebbs and flows of reading. However, I have been reading some nonfiction, but the focus has been on art. So I did want to pick some top nonfiction books to just give you some options if fiction really isn't your jam, or you weren't really feeling the same kind of fiction that I enjoy reading or am enjoying reading this year. I don't know why I struggled so much with that sentence. And all of these, true to my word, when I looked through all the books that I had read this year, the top nonfiction books to me were I did pick them, were focused on art. So the first one was Hokusai by Matthew Forer. I'm pretty sure I'm destroying that name, so it will be in the description. Up to this point in the year, when I checked this book out of the library, I had read a couple books. I had read 100 Aspects of the Moon, which is on Japanese woodblock printing, and I had read Japan Journeys, which also focused on Japanese woodblock printing. Sometimes I find when I find a topic I enjoy in the library, I try to get almost all the books my library has on that topic, and this was kind of in that vein. But this particular book on the artist of Japanese woodblock printing, Hokusai, again, the name will be in the description, was just really enjoyable, and I feel like a very, very good read. So if you're interested in Japanese woodblock printing, you don't know anything about it, you want to know where to start, you're just looking for some nonfiction, I would recommend this one because I really enjoyed this one. And of course, I've read other things and I have other reviews on Japanese woodblock printing if after reading this book you decide that you want to branch out. So that one was particularly well done and I liked that one. Next would be The Pink and Blue Project by Jungmi Yoon. I hope I'm saying that correctly. The Pink and Blue Project is a art project, a photography project done by a Korean, or I don't know if she's, I think she's Korean. She was doing a lot of photography in Korea. Her her project to photograph children's bedrooms and, if possible, children's bedrooms as they age. The focus is kind of on how a lot of girls had a preference for pink items and would have bedrooms filled with pink items, while boys might have a preference for blue items and fill their bedroom with blue items. Along with the photography, there were some really interesting articles in the middle of the book, and in my review I kind of explained what I would feel like would be the best way to go about enjoying this volume of photography. So you can check out my review on that if that sounds interesting. I just really thought the photography was good and interesting. The cover was really pretty and it called my name, it took my attention off the shelf. So I'm glad I read it, and I think that if you like photography and you haven't heard of this project or this photographer, then maybe give this one a read. Finally, the last book on my list for top books in this half of 2023 is Embroidery: The Art of Yoshioka. This is an illustrator who has a little tiny book, not actually tiny, but a smaller book. It's not as big as, say, the Pink and Blue Project by Jungmi Yoon, but this one is just a little booklet of illustrations by Yoshioka, hence The Art of Yoshioka. I just really like the illustration style that the artist has. I just like looking at the pictures. I went back and looked through it a second time after reading it a first time, and I really liked it. A lot of the book is in Japanese. Some of it has English like sections in it, but there's a whole section in the back that's entirely in Japanese, but don't let that dissuade you from reading it if you are not someone who speaks Japanese or understands Japanese. I don't speak or read Japanese at all, but just looking at the illustrations in and of itself was enough to catapult this book to the top of the list. I love the illustration style, and I think that this artist is very, very talented. So if you're looking to check out some cool illustrations, maybe check out Embroidery: The Art of Yoshioka, because I loved this series. I'm still in the manga mindset. I love this collection of illustrations, and I think if you like art, you may like this collection of illustrations too. That is my favorites, a little bit about what I've been reading, how I've been feeling about it this year, and kind of, what rose to the top over my large amount of books that I read in the first 6 months of the year. I like knowing what you're reading, how you're feeling, what you've been doing, how little or much you've been reading this year, how you think it's changed. I love hearing all of that. So if you have any comments whatsoever, leave it down below. I'd love to hear it. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.